credible sources to tell you what's happening around you. If you're not experiencing it yourself, then it's hardly likely that you're going to find truth. And this is what we are dealing with in what we're calling the post-truth age. It is what it is. The post-truth age, that's been up on us for a while. We are, in the first outing of President Trump, U.S. President Trump, just in the early days of what they're calling Trump 1.0, his first presidency, there was an interview on one of the cable news network channels. I think it might have been CNN. I can't recall. It might have been Fox too. I'm not sure. Anyway, one of his counselors was presented with the truth about a matter. And in her response, she said, well, that might be your truth, but we've got an alternative truth. And the moment she said that, we crossed into a post-truth era. And we are still in that. As a matter of fact, it's been accelerated right now. And as long as we understand that, then we know that we can't get the truth. And believe me, we weren't even getting the truth before from any of these stations that we call mainstream media or legacy media. We weren't getting the truth because to find truth through media, you yourself have to understand, and I think discuss with yourself, have a conversation with yourself about first of all, what truth is, and secondly, the source you're getting this from, because media ownership determines and dictates what you're told. And so you think that, oh wow, this is all objective media, and so they're going to tell me what is true. BBC is going to say what is true. CNN is going to say what is true. Fox News. No. You first have to look at either who owns these stations or who sponsors majority of the operations of these stations. And what we do know, that media, what we're calling legacy media, mainstream media, whether it is print or radio, television, doesn't matter. There are about 5 main owners of these medias, if so many. Rupert Murdoch, of course, is one. Lord Rothermere is another. And Rothermere is like the Daily Mail and so on. And that is so mainstream, but it is one of the most toxic. And then you have, as I said before, the Rupert Murdoch empire. You have just Jeff Bezos, who has entered now. You have the Ellisons, who are taking over media through their acquisition of Paramount. And I think I just read something where they have bought out Tyler Perry out of BET Plus. So the media ownership is really small, really central, and they are the same ones who are. If you look at the conglomerate, the media conglomerate, if you look at what they're investing in, what they own, who they're backing, their circles, you'll find it's a very tiny circle. We can almost say the Epstein class, but not necessarily. It's more the Rothschild, Rockefellers, J.P. Morgans, and I dare say the Carneys. I know you think all that about Mark Carney, but Mark Carney's right there with them. And we'll have another conversation about that another time. Well, we have been trying to tell you anyway. So beware the Ides of March. If you want the truth, it's going to be very difficult in this time. So critical thinking, question the money, question who is telling you, question the sponsorship, question the finances, the economics of it, because everything rests on who owns it, who is funding it. And that goes for every single media operation, whether here in Jamaica or globally. That is the bottom line. So we're seeing this emergent economic crisis. The International Energy Agency have said that this is the greatest energy shock in history. Others have said it is the greatest energy shock since 1973. But the international, the energy agency, have said in history, we see oil prices going all the way up to 100 and kind of creeping back down when some comments were made by Donald Trump. But these are dark times, my love. All around the land, or Beatles call, these are dark times. These are dark times. Let me have men about me that are fat. Good morning, Donny. Happy Mother's Day to Mothering Sunday, it is called in the UK. It is Mothering Sunday in the UK. Mother's Day, we know it as a happy Mother's Day to you in the UK, to all the UK mothers who are listening in, to my sister Elaine, who is now in Tunisia, to my sister Larry. Dawn Eaton, thank you so much for the Mother's Day. Greetings to Joan. Joan is actually here on the island. Happy Mother's Day. Draw the line, and we have been, there was no obvious line to draw in 2019, 2020. But we drew it anyway. And I want to go over that and to draw the line from the COVID lockdown to where we are right now. There is a direct line, a direct connection, and what does knowing do? What does knowing do? That is a question. But we're going to draw that line. Up inside of the program this morning, going to be speaking with Professor Andre Horton, looking at the World War III and the most dangerous energy shock in modern history. We're asking the questions this morning. Going to be speaking with Professor Vereen Shepherd, Gender-Based Violence in Jamaica. There's a book that's about to be launched. It's edited by Delia Bean and Professor Vereen Shepherd, looking at gender-based violence in the Caribbean.
The road is so foggy.
And that's going to be happening this Thursday at the University of the West Indies, so prepare to go. We're going to be talking to Vereen in a little while.
My way is long, so long.
Also in the program this morning,
My head never swell, my heart never lives, I never have no fear.
Ras Jomo, journalist, Pan-Africanist disc jock,
Never live, I never have no fear.
living in Buffalo, New York,
Foggy, foggy.
looking at Black America and the MAGA moment. You know, Ras Jomo has been in studio with me on the phone lines over time. We co-host the program together every year for many, many, many years after Rebel Salute. And he's been in and out of a studio with me over time. And he's been predicting exactly what's happening now in the United States. So we're going to be talking to him about that. And then Professor Horace Campbell rejoins me as we look at the American empire in decline, the war on Iran, the impact on Africa and the Caribbean.
So foggy, foggy. Road is so foggy, foggy.
So we've got that. It's a lot. It's a lot to get through.
My dear spirit high, going out and coming in. From all evil things and evil doers, let me tell you accidentally.
But as I said before, one of the things I wanted to do was to draw the line for you from COVID lockdown to show that this is not by what we're going through, what we're witnessing, what we are bearing witness to. It's by design. And as I've been saying in this space, the old order is not compatible with the new order. And bearing that in mind, and that's a new world order, the new world economic order, the global reset. If you recall, at the beginning of COVID and the COVID lockdown, one of the things that we did in this space for many moons was to talk about the fact that we are in the middle of in the beginning of a global reset, phase one of the global reset. And we kind of talked you through the phases as they happened. So we've come through quite a few of the phases. The lockdown was part of that global reset. All the way to the vaccines, part of the global reset, all the way to what we heard from Mark Carney at Davos, part of the global reset. And here we are, part of the global reset. It's a global reset. It's leading to technocracy and transhumanism. And I want to talk you through that because it's very important for us to remind ourselves about where we are on this, in the scheme of things, on the scale of things. We saw phase one, right? The emergency powers and suspension of normal governance. And this was the first stage. We saw the rapid introduction of the emergency legal authority. One of the things that came out of that was the Coronavirus Act of 2020, and that granted governments sweeping powers, including restricting our movements, remember that, closing businesses, detaining suspected infected individuals, and bypassing normal regulatory purposes. And we signed off on that. All of us signed off on that. Well, not all of us. All of Uno. Uno, a good word. Remember that. A Bantu word. It means exactly what it says. All of Uno. All right. And then this happened globally, by the way. Then we saw phase two. Phase one was all of that. Governments demonstrating that they could temporarily suspend normal civil liberties in response to a crisis. This is exactly what happened. And this created a legal framework for future emergency governance. Remember, we were telling you that there was no way they're going to pull back on the DRMA. There was no way they were going to pull back on all of the emergency governance structures and systems and policies and protocols that they put in during COVID. These now became permanent. So that was phase one. Phase two, between 2020 and 2021, this is a global reset. Between 2020 and 2021, phase two was the digital tracking and population data systems. If you recall, the United Kingdom was way out in front of everyone with this. It was frightening. Not only that, we saw this in East Asia, in West Asia. We saw this around the world, and we were buying into this, right? So once movement restrictions were in place, governments introduced mass digital monitoring tools, and we were glad for them. So we had, I have to take myself out of this thing. But pay attention, because I'm taking you through the phases to take us right where we are now. All right. We had the contact tracing smartphone apps. You remember that? That was all over Europe. The contact tracing smartphone apps. We had the NHS COVID-19. We had COVID Safe. It was also in the United Kingdom. Them sent out some little robot dogs. And we were all laughing at the little yellow robot dogs who were telling people to go inside. Go inside. That was phase two. Security agencies in some cases were authorized to track citizens' phones directly to enforce quarantine. We were spitting at our brothers and sisters who boarded the same bus as us and happened to sneeze or cough. We threw them out of the buses. We threw them out of the taxis. We would not talk to them. So phase two also established a key precedent, because what it did, public acceptance of mass data collection was tied to public health. So the walla we got open with mouth, make them push one something around it and put with data, with DNA. Not only that, We turn our head upside down, so they push a thing all the way up in our nostrils. It sting, it hurt, and they collected that also. They tied mass data collection to public health. They did that. Normalization of location tracking and digital surveillance. They did that. And the world welcomed that. Globally, that was welcomed. Africa and the Caribbean resisted in serious ways, I can tell you that. Jamaica resisted, continental Africa resisted, but here we are. Then phase 3 was the digital passports and behavioral compliance systems. So they introduced credential systems controlling access to society. So we saw the vaccine passports. Remember that? We saw the QR code entry systems. We saw health certification for travel, workplaces, and events. Remember that? That was phase 3 of the global reset. We are moving into a new world economic order. The global reset started the minute they announced that there was a pandemic. All right. So your participation in society in phase 3 could be mediated by a digital credential. This is extremely important because this is where we saw a governance shift in phase 3. We saw the infrastructure being created for digital identity, for conditional access systems, and for behavioral compliance mechanisms. People were thrown into prison. Doctors and scientists who questioned this were fired, lost their jobs, don't get it back yet. People died. And then phase 4 was institutionalization after they ended the lockdown. Institutionalization after they ended the lockdown. So when the emergency phase ended, many countries removed restrictions. But as I was saying to you, and as I have said to you, and as I've been telling you since 2019, the systems that were put in place that we just went through, they remained. These systems remained. Some emergency laws were partially retained even after pandemic restrictions were lifted. Governments and institutions then began repurposing pandemic systems for a few things. 1, for broader management. 2, for digital ID programs. 3, for biometric identity verification. 4, for artificial intelligence, AI-driven public services. 5, for digital health records. And here comes Palantir. Here comes Palantir. Let us not forget Palantir. Palantir is critical to all that is happening here. But let us also remember that we spoke about Anthropic just a few weeks ago, I think 2 weeks ago. Let us remember Anthropic. That bomb that killed 180 odd children and teachers and some parents in Iran might have very well been guided by one of these systems, Anthropic or anything from Palantir, because there's some stories there that Palantir is testing. What went on in Gaza, for example? Or there was a carpet bombing of Gaza. That's still going on. But the testing of this artificially driven weapons, that's still happening. If you recall, in 2023, we did a program where we asked what, with the advent of artificial intelligence or anti-intelligence, what are some of the innovations that we will see that will be disruptive? And one of the things, and my number one, I gave about 5 to 10, and my number one was, I asked you to call in, you gave. I also had a conversation with Big A. But my number one was drone technology. And I said drone technology Because at the time, it was clear to me that we had drones, and drones were going to be used as weapons. And whether it's suicide drones or any other drones, they were going to be the big thing. And what is happening now in Iran? It is drone technology that is carrying, that is a strength behind the wins we're seeing in Iran. I have to take a quick break, but I do want to tell you about phase 5. Are we at phase 5? Because we have phase 5, we have phase 6, we have phase 7, and we have phase 8 and phase 9. From the announcement of COVID-19 to the lockdown, to the vaccines, to the introduction of surveillance and data mining of our information and our biology, our DNA, etc. We don't even know what that is. It's training AI systems across the world. I don't know what our government signed off on. The government could have signed off on anything. Remember that Depo-Provera is a drug that was tested on Jamaican women for many years without them knowing. Remember that. And remember that when Israel went into Ethiopia during the artificial famine in Ethiopia, do you remember that famine where they had the song, We Are the World, We Are the People, and the money was supposed to go to Ethiopia? Well, remember that when Israel went into Ethiopia to rescue the Jews of Ethiopia, remember, the original people of Ethiopia are the Jews. Okay? We can have that conversation left, right, and center. So Israel doesn't have credibility as it is today to say or to claim as much as Ethiopia. So when they went into Ethiopia on Operation Moses, Operation Solomon, there were a few flights from Ethiopia where the Jews, the Beta Israel, there is a name that we call them, but it is, they do not necessarily want us to call them that. But I'll tell you the name so that you know who I'm talking about, the Falashas, right? But that's not a name that we're using in this space. Beta Israel. So when Israel went into Ethiopia to collect, to rescue the Jews, the original Jews, and brought them into Israel, one of the first things they did was to sterilize the women. Google it, because you think it's a conspiracy theory. Google it. They used Depo-Provera, the same drug that was tested on Jamaican women, our mothers, our grandmothers. When the pharmaceutical companies, one of the main ones was Pfizer, developed Depo-Provera, they tested this drug on Jamaican women. They did not know that they were being tested. They did not give consent. Now, there is a class action lawsuit globally with thousands of women who, reading and understanding the research that has come from, published in the Lancet, that Depo-Provera is connected to dementia, to brain tumors, to Alzheimer's, to brain tumors, to cancers. Well, they say they're not necessarily cancerous. So these women are suing now in a class action lawsuit. That is the same drug. You see the point we're making? It's the same thing that happened in COVID. We got tested. But here we are. mRNA. We'll talk about that another time. So phase 5 was the integration with AI, digital identity, and technocratic governance. Remember, we told you this is about technocracy and transhumanism, whether it is techno-feudalism or techno, whatever we want to call it, it is, the base of it is technocracy. And if you listen closely to Peter Thiel and people from Palantir and Elon Musk and all of them, the ultimate, which is really accelerating and going pretty fast, is transhumanism. So this is a phase that we see unfolding around us, where the technologies and the policies are rapidly accelerating. And I want to cut it here for a minute because we're out of time. But just to say that we're seeing the digital IDs in place, we're seeing the biometric identity systems, we're seeing the cross-border digital identity, so that's in place. We're also seeing the anti-intelligence governance, the AI governance, that's technocracy. And we're seeing that accelerating, and this is why everything is going so fast. The old system has to be destroyed, totally destroyed, because it is not compatible with what is unfolding, and what is unfolding so quickly. And so we are witnessing the complete destruction of the old system. I don't have enough time. If I get some time later on, I'll take you through the rest. Also, if not, I'll take it next week. But I'll talk us through this to see where we are in the scheme of things. Bottom line is, if I were you, I'd go back and read Mark Carney's speech at Davos, because Mark Carney is a sly old fox. Mark Carney is, of course, from Goldman Sachs. Mark Carney, former head of the Bank of England. Mark Carney, former head of the Bank of Canada. Mark Carney, deeply rooted in the World Economic Forum, Davos, a mentee, if you will, of Klaus Schwab. And because he presented such an opposite and different kind of a figure to Donald Trump at Davos, you all stood up, all stood up and applauded him. But Mark Carney told us the truth. That's truth. He said, the rules-based order has ruptured. He said, the new world order is upon us. He said, we knew very well that the rules-based order was a fraud, a fake, and was not working. And he gave a whole analogy of a metaphor of hanging up a sign, using some Russian author or German author hanging up a sign in the shop and so on. Don't know a fool shop him, I hang up a sign in about the sign hang up and so on. But the bottom line to Mark Carney's speech is this. We were lying to you from the end of World War II. Well, World War I, but he said, but stick to the script of his speech. Coming out of the League of Nations, which collapsed and led to World War II, well, not led to, but it collapsed during the World War II era, and into the United Nations, which has now collapsed. We have to call it what it is. It is what it is, and we have to do and deal with the isness of things. The League of Nations couldn't stop Japan from invading Manchuria. And Italy saw that invasion and said, okay, well, if you can't stop Japan from invading Manchuria, then I can invade Italy. And they did. And you know what happened. So Manchuria was 1931, Ethiopia was 1935, and we're in World War II. The League of Nations that was put in place on the back of World War I failed because it too was an illusion. It couldn't stand up in the face of power. It's the very same thing with the United Nations. They couldn't stop Netanyahu and Israel from bombing Gaza. They couldn't stop NATO from expanding into Russia. They couldn't stop Crimea. They couldn't stop the Ukraine-Russia war. And they couldn't stop the killing of children in Iran. And they can't stop the destruction that's underway now in East Asia, in West Asia. Now, this is critical. This is a prognostication, but it's also a clear warning. The League of Nations failed, the United Nations failed. This is basically what it is. And we're moving now into World War III. We're in World War III, and on the backside of that, we'll see what we see. But I'll come back to this if I can, and I'll also spend some more time talking about COVID-19 and how this was the precursor for where we are now. I want to go to my very first interview for the morning, and we should be joined on the line in studio. I know, I hope he's on camera, by Professor Andre Horton. He is a professor of macroeconomics and international finance in the Department of Economics at the University of the West Indies, Mona. He specializes in macroeconomic engineering with a research focus on international economics and macroeconomics for small country development. He's a former senator and an International Monetary Fund distinguished fellow. He is KPMG Pete Maverick Scholar, Thomas Delarue Scholar, and a British Commonwealth Scholar. Bottom line is that he is a scholar and well suited for the conversation we're about to have now. I'll tell you more about Professor Andre Horton as we go ahead. Basically, the International Energy Agency has said that has said that this is the greatest energy crisis, if you will, energy shock in history. Professor Horton, I'm very happy to see you. Good morning. Oh, I'm not hearing you. Listen, is that you? Are you muted or is that us? Okay, brilliant. I'm hearing you loud and clear.
You hearing me now? Yeah, man, it's good to see you. Good to be able to speak to your listeners as well. Hope you're having a great morning.
Yes, and let me just tell our listeners, thank you so much, to please to go to YouTube, because Professor Horton is usually on the phone. So go to YouTube and see what he looks like at 7:03. You're looking very handsome this morning, as usual.
Oh, thank you. So do you. Lovely lady.
Thank you so much.
Blessings to you.
Professor Horton, what a time we're living in.
Yeah, it's serious times. It's serious times, and everyone must be able to understand what is happening now, because we are going back not just to 1944, but all the way to 1914, when World War One started. This year has a similar calendar, and if you understand how history unfolds, history repeats itself. It's never a thing where it happens once. It happens every 50 years. It happens every century. And we must be cognizant of what is taking place and how we are going to cope as a sovereign nation with everything that's going on globally.
You went all the way to 1914. And you talk about is this a similar calendar? I noted that. Underscore that for us a bit, because I think that kind of went over some of us heads to say we are literally on the same calendar, if you will.
And it's remarkable because every 50, every 100 years the world repeats itself, and this calendar is the exact same calendar that was in 1914. And I mean, the events for war aren't necessarily the same, but they are very similar. And what is happening is that because Iran is so crucial to the oil basket of many countries, and because the Strait of Hormuz is so crucial to the oil basket of many countries, what is happening now is having spillover effects on a lot of countries who didn't bargain for what is taking place. So for those of us who don't know, the Strait of Hormuz transports between 20 and 25% of the global oil support on a daily basis. It accounts for over 20 million barrels of oil. And what has been happening now since the violence between them and the United States and their neighbors, only a few ships, mainly from China and India, have been allowed to pass through the strait freely. Yeah. A lot of the other ships that the world depends on have been stalled, and that has been having significant implications on the supply of oil, which has been having implications on the price of oil. So to note, yesterday we know that the price of oil has been over $100 a barrel, but yesterday we got news that if this continues, then the price of oil might reach $150 per barrel, and that's profound. We haven't seen oil go past $100 per barrel since 2022, and prior to that, we haven't seen oil go to $150 a barrel for a long time. Even in the global financial crisis of 2008, oil didn't reach so far. So
And this is why
it
we're hearing
has.
that this is the greatest shock in history. Is it in history? Not
It's
2008,
for a
not
long time because
1973.
yes, 1973 and 1978 were very pervasive oil price shocks, and those shocks are significant, especially to us, because check this. Coming out of the 1960s, Jamaica had one of the most productive economies. When we started diversifying into tourism, we started diversifying into manufacturing, and we started diversifying into the production of bauxite. And when the first oil price shock hit in the 1970s, oil price jumped up the first time was by 30%. And then it continued to increase gradually and so on. But the importance of that shock is that when Jamaica had an increased oil import bill, we had to figure out how we're going to pay for it, right? Because we need foreign currency to purchase the oil that we need. Now, what normally happens is that we normally sell bauxite, get that revenue, and use that revenue to purchase oil. Now, what Manley did at the time was to increase the price of bauxite to match the increase in the price of oil, so that we don't feel the balance of payments effect. However, at the time, New Zealand emerged as a new bauxite producer. So, because New Zealand is a larger landmass, albeit their bauxite is not of the same quality as ours, but sometimes in the global marketplace, they're not just looking at quality, they are looking at price. So, New Zealand was able to price us out of the bauxite market, and as a result, we didn't earn enough foreign exchange from the bauxite in order to cover the oil purchases that we needed to make. And that was the first time when we went to the International Monetary Fund in a holistic way to say, look, our net international reserves is not sufficient in order for us to make these purchases of oil, and we need balance of payment support. So that was a significant point in our economic life, because we moved from a highly productive, very rapid, fast growth GDP country. At that time, GDP was growing by 9%, productivity growth by about 12%. So, the economy was picking up speed at the time. And that oil price shock derailed us, and we haven't recovered since. And that was over 50 years ago.
We haven't recovered.
No, we haven't
Over 50
recovered
years ago.
over 50 years ago.
What are you seeing in terms of how Jamaica is likely to be impacted now? Because we saw the price going up. Obviously, the Strait of Hormuz is still closed. And then we saw the lowering when the U.S. president said, okay, we're going to send some people and send a Navy and escort them and close. And now we're waking up to him calling on Europe to go and defend the Strait of Hormuz, and I will help you. So obviously this is we can understand the price shock, but what do you see for Jamaica economically? Because there's also a shift in the global economic order. So there are two things happening here. What's your prediction or prognostication, if you will, of what is about to hit Jamaica?
Remember, first and foremost, we are a tourism dependent nation, and tourists travel here by air or sea. And because tourists come here by air or sea, then these types of transportation are fuel dependent, and these fuel dependent transportation methods will see increase in costs. And whenever there's an increase in cost, then there's going to be a reduction in demand. Albeit on the flip side, because Middle East has become unstable, then global travel to that particular area or even in transit from that area is going to slow down tremendously. And as a result, we'll have more tourists diverting towards the west because it appears to be much safer. So that is how it looks from the tourism side. From the manufacturing side, our cost of production has gone up, which the cost of electricity has always been a problem for Jamaica's manufacturing. As you know, we charge about 34 cents per kilowatt hour compared to China, 8 cents per kilowatt hour, America, less than 10 cents per kilowatt hour as well. But what it does, it puts the Caribbean basin into perspective to say, listen, who are my neighbors? What do they have? So it puts back focus on Trinidad and Guyana to say, what role are you playing in the Caribbean Basin Initiative? What role are you playing in CARICOM? What role are you playing in the CSME, which is the Caribbean Single Market and Economy? As Caribbean nations, together we have a stronger voice. Together we have a stronger backative. And I think that the Caribbean leaders need to come together, sit around a table, and put our differences aside and to zoom into the value of the region itself. And it's not just about we didn't accomplish referendum in the 1960s, so federation failed. It's listen, yes, it failed. What can CARICOM do to rectify that? And that is how we ought to look at it, because it doesn't make sense for our neighbors to have the resources that we need, and we have to go all the way to the Middle East and have to bear the bulk of those prices. If you think about the petrodollar and you think about the United States, you can recall Petrocaribe, which is our relationship with Venezuela, where Venezuela exchanged oil and we taught their citizens English at the university. So how that work? We didn't give them any money. They say, okay, we have 200 people who want you to teach English for X amount of time. We are going to pay you in oil. And it worked well because we had such a good relationship with Venezuela. And it's very unfortunate that because of our global geopolitical linkages with the United States in particular, we had to relinquish that particular relationship with Venezuela.
We
But
sabotage. We
what
sabotage
has replaced
ourselves.
it?
Yeah, exactly. We continue to sabotage ourselves to prove the United States point. This
Yes.
is the problem that we have, because we see a very similar thing happening with Cuba right now. This is very
Exactly.
interesting. But you mentioned the opportunities, and the main one or number one you listed seemed to be tourism. I'm a little bit skeptical about that, because if this is a global energy shock, if this is a global incident or event, then the ability or capacity or capability of a tourist to travel, whether or not you can go to West Asia,
Yeah, so that is
going to
what
be
I said.
limited.
I showed you both sides of the coin, right? One side is that it's definitely going to become more expensive for them to travel.
Yes,
But the
yes.
other side is that because the Middle East has gotten so unstable, then if tourists definitely want to travel, it is going to be in the Western hemisphere of the world. So it does not necessarily have to be Jamaica, but the Western hemisphere of the world looks more attractive now than does the East. And that's reality. But overall, where opportunities lie for us, energy diversification is going to become very important. It's not just lip service, and Jamaica has been presented with a wealth of opportunities where this is concerned, where wind is concerned, where solar is concerned, where even hydro energy is concerned, and we have not diversified. I mean, if you talk about the 1920s now, coming out of the World War One,
All right, hang
America's
on there.
economy.
That's a way to go. But just before we're speaking with Dr. Professor Andre Horton, right? And we're talking about what the economists and the financial world is referring to as the greatest energy shock in history. And Professor Horton is agreeing with that, and talking us through history to understand where we are today. So, Prof, you were telling us about 1920s on the backside of World War One, and
Yes.
connecting that to what happened in the United States. I interrupted there, so let's pick up from there.
Yes, so how economics normally work, it's normally governed by what we call classical economics. Now, classical economics says that there should be no government intervention. The market mechanism should determine how price allocate resources in the economy through demand and supply. However, coming out of World War One, the United States found themselves in a very depressed economy where they could not stimulate demand. Demand was low, output was low, and people were suffering. Businesses were closing left, right, and center. And that was what caused what we call the Great Depression of the 1930s, where poverty was pervasive across the United States and was having spillover effects on the world. Now, that gave birth to Keynesian economics when John Maynard Keynes came in and said, listen, if the market mechanism is not working, then the government has to come in to help the economy to stimulate itself. And that gave birth to what we call expansionary fiscal policy. For the point of case, United States, Hoover was the president at the time, and they started rapid expansion in infrastructure in railway, and the Hoover Dam was built at that time. And the point I am making is that in Jamaica, the government has to step up now and play a real role in how it assists in stimulating the economy through the building of key infrastructure that we need in order for the country to reignite its growth pursuits. And you played a song a while ago about Burkina Faso, and they have been very great in how they have approached their own macroeconomic management. Last week they came up with a 64 billion US dollar expansion plan. A lot of people were skeptical about their ability to see through this plan, but I am very confident in their ability because they have a real plan. And that is what Jamaica needs. We need
So you're saying that
politicians who
we don't have a real plan, and
no.
I don't expect you to say much here in terms of what that plan should be, but give us an idea of what you're talking to. How could Jamaica go out? Is it too late though for Jamaica to go out in front of this, or is it never too late?
Never too late because time is a continuous thing. So time is like a fictitious thing that the Romans try to count, but that's just counting time. Time is a never-ending thing. So when we go, other persons will come and replace us, and when they go, other persons will come and replace us. So throughout the course of history, there will always be new entrants after people exit this earth, and it's
Yes.
up to them to see what is happening in their time and how they should coordinate their resources to get the best output for their population at that time. Energy has been a big problem for us, and that is why we need a dam. Water distribution, water storage, water harvesting has been a big problem for us. And if you think about it, output instability, because agriculture, let's talk about agriculture. Everybody love agriculture because everything comes from agriculture. Food, clothes, housing, everything comes from agriculture. So everybody love agriculture. But Jamaica has not been able to do well in agriculture since we came out of sugar and cotton. So you notice that when we were slaves, agriculture was done on a large scale basis. So you had 10 sugar farm, 10 cotton farm, and those were the focus of the economy, right? Now, coming out of slavery, what happened was those large farms were fragmented and they were distributed to people in very small portions, but it wasn't done in a coordinated way. For example, I say to you, okay, Kabu, okay, I'm going to give you guys 5 acre, 5 acre, 5 acre, but all of you are going to still produce sugar. At the end of the year, we're gonna collect the sugar that the 20 of you produce. We're gonna still sell it in the same way so we make the same money. No, it went that you know with your 5 acre, you split it up, give 5 children, each of them have an acre. They themselves know on that acre produce 1/8 of an acre of tomato, 1/8 of an acre of scallion, 1/8 of an acre of onion, and so on and so forth. So the collective economies of scale that we normally benefited from our sale of these agricultural crops to the global economy, albeit England got wealthy off it, etc., etc. And many people say because it was slavery. Yes, it was slavery, but slavery came at a cost because they still had to feed the slaves. It's no different now from the minimum wage that people receive when they go to work. It's the same thing. It's instead of giving them food and shelter, you give them tuppence that even cannot purchase food or shelter. So it's even worse when you look at it. So that's not the excuse. The excuse is how coordinated is our efforts as a collective body.
But the question is also why? Because all these years, and we have not managed to at least to innovate where agriculture is concerned. A country like Jamaica should have been able to do that. So there was a why there. And then, is this why connected to this very same Bretton Woods institutions that we have signed on to? Are there, is this deliberate? There has to be something behind.
Yeah, man. If you watch a documentary with Michael Witter, Life and Death, and it spoke of our agricultural industries and the sabotage
Stephanie Blank's
in the
documentary.
1970s. Yes, we came under a lot of sabotage in the 1970s, especially as it relates to our dairy industry and so on and so forth. We were flooded with milk powder, etc., etc. But innovation, as you speak, is a sovereign thing where collectively we must realize who we are and what we need to do. Our coconut came under sabotage, as you know, that disease that blew all of the coconut off the top, just left the stalk and so on and so forth. The white flies now here, or banana at some point in time came under sabotage, as or citrus. So we've come under a lot of sabotage. But albeit, how have we diversified in order to cope? Because greenhouses help to prevent a lot of these things. So, as I say, we have not been innovating to correct the sabotage. We've just succumbed to it.
I think we diversified into tourism. And into the worst kind of tourism that any Caribbean country could find themselves tied to. And now the tourism industry is singing the praise that one, we are. There are opportunities out of disasters like Melissa, and so we're going to go into creating a Martha's Vineyard in St. Elizabeth, boutique industry, private jets. Somebody's mad like Sean, because this is, to me, this is egregious, if you will. So and the next thing we got from the tourism industry is that, yeah, the war in Iran, which is from all indications is World War III, we are going to benefit from that. Tourism is going to benefit from that. What kind of damn foolishness is this? I think that we are totally out of our senses of our rockers, the way we're dealing. You mentioned water. And we have Professor Shepherd in the room to talk to in a minute in the waiting room. But you mentioned water. This is the year of water according to the World Economic Forum, according to the Africa Union.
It's a blue year.
It's a blue year. They're having water conferences all over the world. But Jamaica is privatizing its water sources, its fresh water sources, and denying access to the Jamaican people, and privatizing its salt water sources and denying access to the Jamaican people. What? I'm so sorry that I'm getting so upset. But
no, you have to. You can, because it shows emotion, and emotions are real because you have care and concern. And as a country, and I was discussing last week with my students, the reason why China is where it is today versus other countries is that the founding members of the Chinese Communist Political Party were majority wealthy people. So in China, you are the wealthy Chinese and the smart Chinese who care about the rest of China and decide that they are going to lead their nation into freedom. In Jamaica, the wealthy people see the place as a bird bush. So they see the economy as something to exploit, not something to develop. So you get to find out that the wealthy, and when people become bright like myself, we assimilate education, we tend to turn our backs on the rest of the population because we are okay. I can buy a BMW, I can buy a Mercedes Benz, I live in a decent house, I can send my children to private school. If they get sick, I can send them to America. So I don't really care. And that is the approach that many middle class Jamaicans take. So they don't contribute towards the human capital development of integration of the country, where we can all collectively come together and say, listen, we need to lift ourselves up by our own bootstraps and to help the poorer class of people to understand the importance of them playing a role into the real economy. And that is the major difference between us and China, because in China, the 49 members of the founding members of the CPC were 42 of them were affluent people. But the affluent in Jamaica don't see the need for the country itself to advance, because they themselves has already advanced, and they need that disparity to feel good about themselves.
Neoliberalism and capitalism wrapped up all in one.
Exactly. Exactly.
My brother, I'm going to invite you back to talk, because we haven't looked at, we raised a point, but this there's also this transition to this new economic model with the digital currencies and so on, that I hope you come back and talk to us about that next week.
Yeah, I have a book that I'm writing on that as well, so we have a lot to talk about.
All right, brilliant. So I'd really like for you to come back and for us to flesh this out. I think it is urgent enough, so if you have the time, please come back.
Yeah, man, definitely. And have a wonderful day, and
You
keep
too.
up the great work as well. Keep up the advocacy. I admire you a lot.
Thank you. Me too. Same. It's mutual. Thank you so much, my brother, Dr. Andre Horton.
Africa must wake up, you know.
Yeah, they're saying that this is the greatest energy shock since, well, in history, since forever. And we are twiddling our thumbs. We're like Nero. Rome is burning and we dancing with a big drum and a little drum, and not recognizing that we're in the middle of what can, and we have to sound the alarm. It is a catastrophe. If this continues, and by all indications, this don't half ready to done. The good thing about it is that the UAE, if you will, is on the back foot, and so can't do as much damage on the continent of Africa that it has been doing. I'm just saying. In Sudan, remember we went through a whole thing showing you how the UAE is everywhere there is so-called civil war, and the RSF is being armed on the continent of Africa. In Sudan, the genocide in Sudan, one of the worst genocide perpetrated against the people of Africa, ongoing in Sudan, funded by the UAE. Now they're on the back foot trying to dodge the drones coming from Iran. We take a quick break. All right, we're back with you inside of the Africa Forum. This is Running African, and my next very, very special guest is my sister, Professor Vereen Shepherd. She's joining us. I know Vereen is up early this morning doing a bit of exercise and so on, but she has taken some time out to just pause and have a conversation with us. We're very happy to have her in the forum. Prof, you're there? All right, so I'm not necessarily seeing Professor Shepherd. I'm not hearing her either. So
hi, good morning, good morning.
Good morning, good morning. I really wanted to see you.
I'm here,
But there you are.
Here.
It's your name. Oh, there you are. Hey, Vereen.
I'm here. Good morning.
Thank you so much for gracing the Africa Forum as you come, as you are. It's beautiful. Vereen, I was watching you yesterday. We're watching each other now, aren't we? So I was watching you yesterday on TV.
Yes.
In Talking History. And a great program. I really enjoyed it. And one of the issues that you raised, you've come here to talk about the book launch and your book, right? But I had to go to your program on Nationwide yesterday. A lot of people don't know you're back, so let me just tell our listeners that she's back. And you talked about the ongoing event now, which is the Pirates Week in Jamaica. You had two special guests with you talking through that. It kind of was such a sobering conversation, because how can we celebrate pirates here in Jamaica was a question that you raised. But then I got to thinking of Jeffrey Epstein. I said, if we haven't called out in Jamaica at any level Jeffrey Epstein, how are we going to call out? How are we going to even understand, Henry Morgan. And if we haven't called out Henry Morgan and the pirate, how in heaven's name are we going to understand Jeffrey Epstein? This is what I thought about as I listened to you yesterday. Just a quick recap, if you will, Prof, of what the gist of that conversation was with Professor Ahmed and Dr. Pat Green yesterday.
Yes. Well, I think the conclusion from all of the discussion yesterday, and by the way, thank you for listening and thank you for giving my program a little big up. Yes, I am back because I felt that it was necessary to rejoin the world from my hibernation and enter into some of these conversations to fully support you too in what you do, to bring understanding to our people, because history is still an unknown country in our country.
Mm-hmm.
So my conclusion from Ahmed and Pat, both of whom wrote pieces in different newspapers about this when they heard about it, is that there's, as Miss Lou would say, we're a living dichotomy. And while we have Emancipation Day, while we celebrate our heroes and heroines who fought against chattel enslavement and colonialism, we still continue to practice the legacies of colonialism. That was what I got from their conversation, because they were very clear that in a country that boasts about our freedom and anti-colonialism, and a country that celebrates these anniversaries that are so important, we still don't get it. And we are celebrating those who oppressed our ancestors. We are celebrating those who were murderers, those who trafficked our ancestors, those who oppressed enslaved Africans. And so I am still in a state of shock. And I remember listening to your program some weeks ago, when you I think last year sometime when you brought it up, and I felt your pain as you walked us through your own views about this. So I don't know what else to say about it. I continue to teach history, to preach anti-colonialism, and to ask our people to live what they say they preach.
And as you talk about the slavery and the legacies of slavery, the book that is about to be published, I think I haven't had a chance to read all of it, but I've been going through.
Yes, it's already published.
It's already published. It's out and it's going to be launched on Thursday. Looking at gender-based violence, and this is edited by yourself and Dr. Delia Bean.
Dr. Delia Bean, yes.
Right. Give us a gist, Vereen, of what the book is about, because there are many chapters and they're all relevant. It's such what a work, what a body of work. The scholarship is phenomenal in terms of just looking at gender-based violence from different perspectives across the Caribbean and historically also. Can you give us a nutshell of what it's about, and also to speak specifically to your own chapter, because you've got a very, very chapter in the book.
Yes, my chapter started the book because we're trying to historicize this phenomenon of gender-based violence. And let me just say that I'm so proud that Dr. Delia Bean asked me to do this with her, because, she was my first PhD student. This is my student, having come into her own and still paying respect to those who, gave her a leg up along the way. So it's not always so. And therefore, I'm really proud of her and her progress. So this is among the first texts, if not the first, in the region to deeply ground modern issues of gender-based violence within a historical lens, using a historical lens, proving that the region's history not only shaped the current reality, but that knowledge of that past is crucial to solving modern problems. So essays in the text also expose the audience to new historical evidence and cases of gender-based violence, which shed light on how modern GBV, as we call it, was inherited and shaped in a colonial framework. So it's a big book, as you said. It's 26 chapters and an epilogue. And we have information, all the authors, people can go and look it up. There's a foreword by the former university director of the Institute for Gender and Development Studies, Professor Diana Fox. So I have an article in it. Delia also has an article in it. And since you talk about my own chapter, what I've tried to do is to show how far back
Prof,
is this phenomenon.
Let me interrupt you for a minute. Only because, let me take a break so that we don't have to break in the middle.
Okay,
so let me do
no
this.
problem.
Safe, reliable, great value. Always buy from an authorized IGL dealer. The time by IGL is
14 now, going up to 8 o'clock. Professor Vereen Shepherd is online. Yes, Prof, your chapter in the book.
Yes, so my chapter is titled Gender-Based Violence in the Caribbean, Historical Roots, Contemporary Redress. And what I've tried to do is to show how far back we go in terms of gender-based violence, because we go to the period of the indigenous peoples and the violence that descended on them with capture and colonialism. Then we go through the period of slavery to show how people like Thomas Thistlewood, and you and I know all about Thomas Thistlewood, who was an enslaver in Western Jamaica, and who left diaries, accounts, evidence of his brutality towards the men and women on the plantation. Because when we talk about gender-based violence, it's not only about the sexual abuse of women by empowered men and not so empowered men sometimes, but about the violence that descend upon us because of our gender, because of our sex. And because of that, we know that men are abused as well, and historically men have been abused. And so what my chapter does is to really look back at some of these stories of, painful acts in our history.
Yes.
I talk about women like Mary Prince, who was enslaved in the Caribbean and who later was taken by her enslavers to England. And then someone published her thoughts, and what her thoughts reveal about the violence of slavery. She talks about Hetty, she talks about her own experience of beating and being transported. She talks about what happened during slavery to those who did not uphold the colonizers' ideas of oppression. So this book is really full of this kind of information.
Yes, go ahead, Vereen.
As I said, we have I don't know if I mentioned this, but we have 26 chapters, and we have 4 men. I know that there should have been more men writing, but we have
Hilary Beckles.
by 4 men: Hilary Beckles, Jonathan Dolby, O'Neill Josephs, and Amilcar Sanatan. And at the launch, Amilcar will kind of represent the authors with because many of them cannot attend the launch this week, and so he will have a video message. And Hilary Beckles talks about black masculinity in Caribbean slavery. We have Hilda News talking about violence against enslaved women in 18th century Suriname. So we have authors looking at the experiences from Jamaica, from Suriname, from Trinidad and Tobago, and right across the Caribbean. We have one of the essays I like is by Jonathan Dolby. He used to teach in Jamaica at the UA. And his article is entitled "The Brutal Passions of the Licentious, the Prosecution of Rape and Sexual Abuse in 19th Century Jamaica." So it's really a broad-based text that looks at the roots of this phenomenon, but also its continuing presence in our society.
I didn't read this chapter, and I can't remember the author who wrote about the domestic violence, and I thought, boy, I really want to get to that chapter to see exactly how this is interrogated. That in itself was kind of provocative when I looked at it. But there's just so much there, and because of time, I don't want to not talk about the launch itself, how people can get there, can participate? Is it on Zoom, or do we have to come up to UA? Give us an idea of what's going to happen on Thursday and where.
Yes. So, but before that, I think the chapter you're talking about is chapter 21 by Kendra and Pitt, which is called Historicizing in Domestic Violence.
Yes.
Solidarity and Struggle in the Domestic Violence Lobby in Trinidad and Tobago. And one of the things about this book that I think is important is that we don't only talk about the scholarship and go back into history to talk about gender-based violence. We talk about how it's manifested today.
Yes.
And we talk about why it still is with us. And then we talk about advocacy. Because you know that I don't believe in just scholarship for scholarship's sake.
I know.
Researching for researching's sake. We have to use it.
We should have introduced you right as a scholar activist.
As a scholar activist.
Yes.
And many of these authors in this text are scholar activists because they believe in the power of activism.
Yes.
And for example, Title Heron,
who
led the Tambourine Army. Remember that march?
I was a big part of that.
Of course.
Yes.
And I walked till my foot nearly drop off. I have to tell you.
The shock wave was there. This is how, how media and activism and academia can really make a difference in Jamaica, because we sent the shockwave into that walk, and the shockwave is IRFM's massive truck for outside broadcast. But I noticed
I remember that. Yeah. So some of these women who were on that march have chapters in this book.
I see Judith
and
Wedderburn.
We focus on activism. Yes,
Judith Wedderburn is here.
Judith Wedderburn, Lynette Vassell. These are the pioneers of our struggle. These are women who were not afraid to stand up.
True.
And when it was not popular, they were writing about gender and about women in Caribbean history, about the relationships of men and women, about the roots of this, because we need to talk about power dynamics and the hegemonic masculinity. So all of that is explained in the book. But it will be at 5:30 this Thursday, March 19, at the University of the West Indies, not the Mona campus, but at the regional headquarters where the Vice Chancellor sits, So as they come on Mona Road, instead of turning to go to the Mona campus, they turn right into the regional headquarters. And it starts at 5:30, I said. So it's a very important book. And we want the book to help those who want to understand the roots of gender-based violence, but also the power dynamics that feeds it today, and why we need to struggle against it. We need equality. We still don't have gender equality in our society, and we need to have that.
The conversation has been ongoing, but this book is such an important disruption. At this point, I think it is critical. I'm going to really encourage all of our listeners, try and get to as many of you as possible. Try and get to the university. Is it available for those who can't?
It will be online. I don't have the link right now with me, but I'll send it to you.
Yes.
And maybe we can put it on our various Facebook pages so that people will see. But yes, we know everybody can't come out. And so, it will be there. But I just want to say that the work is a call to action, indicating the ways in which important work has been done over centuries to combat gender-based violence. Because remember, our enslaved ancestors fought against this too. Our women stood up against gender-based violence. Our men tried to stand up against this violence against them by empowered male. But we're also celebrating their victories. While giving a roadmap to what is needed to end the scourge of gender-based violence once and for all. We need to stop hierarchizing power. We need to understand that we're in this together. And we appeal to men and women to interrupt this scourge that still is on our landscape.
And this is the point,
Kabu.
It says still on our landscape. What do we know? What kind of numbers do we have? I don't like to go numbers when we talk about gender-based violence, but the research has been done, I'm sure, in terms of what Jamaica's situation is in comparison to the Caribbean, and then what the Caribbean is. We had just in the last 2 weeks, two high-profile cases where two high-profile men have been sentenced in some, one is good, the other one in some kind of way. But I'm not quite sure the extent to which we were even aware of how pervasive this is.
Yes, I don't have the recent figures now, but I know that when they read my own article, they will see how the various percentages and the change from year to year in the percentages of gender-based violence. It's too high. Let me just say it's too high. And one of the things is that it's not only perpetrated by men, it's perpetrated by women as well. And that is why we need the education. There are quite a few students in the Institute for Gender and Development Studies now studying this. But when I was the director of the IGDS, I absolutely saw how this affects our society because, I was looking at the ways in which we did a study on the dropout rate at schools. And realize that one of the reasons that boys are dropping out in excess of women. Women stay in school and they use that for upward social mobility. And then they get the jobs and then they're earning okay. And then there's this view that because we still have a lingering ideology that men should be head of the household and men should be the income earners and men should look about women and all of that. That has been changing, and that has been changing for some time. And so when some men feel as if they're not economically in charge, not economically empowered, then it comes out in violence against women. And so there needs to be a more gender understanding across between men and women, so that they understand that it's okay if the women are earning more than you are earning. It doesn't mean that we should.
But yes. Don't we have to contextualize that in the psychology of which is the personality disorders, if you will, whether it is narcissism, because that is a very serious one. This is where people usually feel that way when, a woman is earning more, or whether you're a sociopath. It seems to me as if this is critical to understanding gender-based violence,
yes, it is critical. Disorder. Yeah, and that's why I'm saying that we need to interrupt this view that because women stay in school, because they want to progress, because of the historical background when they were, considered inferior. Yes. When women are trying to progress, yes, to make sure they have the money to look about their children and so on, and to have upward social mobility, men should not feel threatened by this. And it should not come out as in the form of violence. Yeah. But I think that we also have to understand the history and the psychology, and also not act in a way which would make our male partners feel inferior. So this is what I'm saying about understanding the history.
We feel inferior if they want to feel inferior because of the psychology of it.
I understand it. So, but I'm just saying that we have to also try to understand each other. But I know what you're saying, but as a researcher, knowing the history and knowing the psychology of this, I'm saying, and as a mother of boys who I'm teaching also about this whole issue. Yeah. But yes, I agree with you that men should just stay in school, come out and go into the workspace and not feel inferior, and do what they have to do to respect women. We must respect women and respect each other and understand where we're coming from and why we have to work hard to progress and overcome this feeling that we are inferior to anybody.
In book 2, which this is such an important book. I think there's going to be something else. I would like to see the psychiatrist.
Yes.
In book 2, talking about you talk about power dynamics before, and how Fred Hickling has done some really great work on how power or narcissistic personality disorder and other personality disorders are built upon the foundation of power and how people deal with the idea of inferiority. And I think part of that is really these personality disorders that he's identified in his research. And I'd like to see that come over to the conversation.
But yes, because I mean, you know, it goes so far back, manifested in sexual abuse of women on ships coming to Jamaica, wife murder,
those
flogging. Yes. And that's what we're trying to we're historicizing it, but we're trying to say, get rid of it.
Yes.
You know, the rape, the murdering of women, just because we're women and because we have been trying to uplift ourselves.
And what about teaching? Yeah, and then there's also this, I get you loud and clear, Professor Shepherd, and then there's this element of how we teach our daughters to, and you talk about raising boys, so that is critical. And then what we teach our daughters to look for, in terms of, you know, we say red flag and that's not enough, but these personality disorders that will hit you or kill you, they're very similar in terms of how they manifest. And I think that we learn this and teach our daughters this too. I think there's so much to gain from this book.
Yes, because what I try to do in my chapter is to show the various ways in which this is manifested: domestic violence, sexual harassment, rape, sexual conflict, and harmful customary or traditional practices. For example, forced marriage and honor crimes, trafficking in women, forced prostitution, violations of human rights in armed conflict, forced sterilization, forced abortion, coercive use of contraceptives, female infanticide, prenatal sex selection. All of these are manifested in our society, and not just in our society, globally. And so, you know, you mentioned the psychological violence. Yes, physical, sexual, and psychological violence, including battering, sexual exploitation, and all of that. And our history is full of them. But I'm saying move away. If we move away from the history, but understand the roots of it, you know, but understanding that today we must try to fight against the sexism, the power, and the hegemonic masculinity, combined with notions of a gender, class, and race hierarchy. And we can't ignore religious. We don't like to talk about it, but we have religious orthodoxy. People believe strictly in what some of the pastors teach them about, you know, hegemonic masculinity.
Exactly.
So we have to move away from that as well.
I mean, we need more time, you know, more women in the church than men, and the role of women in propping these men up when they're in their narcissistic robes. Vereen, I really want to invite you back. So we can have when I'm finished reading the text, because I'm not finished, and then all some of the other.
Yes, it's a big book to read, so I don't blame you for not having been able to get through it. But I'm just saying that we have a lot of information on this phenomenon, and as people read this book, you know, I think greater understanding, they will have greater understanding, because the chapters are really, really important. The broad-based issues that come up from right across the Caribbean and beyond. And so I urge the schools, the colleges, you know, to use this book. Gender-based violence in the Caribbean, historical roots, contemporary continuities. That's the title.
Cool title. Where is it available?
The University of the West Indies Press published it. So the UA Press on the university campus. And, you know, sadly, Kabu, we don't have as many bookshops as we used to.
I know.
You know? And this is an issue.
Anti-intelligence is taking over.
And you know, what I realize is that you mentioned the statistics, because recent global prevalence figures indicate that 35% of women worldwide have experienced either intimate partner violence or non-partner sexual violence in their lifetime. And globally, as many as 38% of murders of women are committed by an intimate partner. So, and I'm sure since I wrote this, the statistics have gone up.
I'm sure.
Rather than
I'm
down.
Sure. I'm
and
sure.
Therefore, until we understand the roots of it and try to understand what it means, the impact it has on our society, we will continue to perpetuate this
Vereen,
type of violence.
Vereen, thank you so much for the work you do, for the work you continue to do, for your passion and your commitment and your activism as a scholar. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to seeing you at the launch and all our friends.
Most definitely on Thursday.
Yes.
At UA. Thank
Thursday,
you so much.
5:30. Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Take
so much.
care.
Yes.
Bye.
You too.
You get chopped? Not take that. Make Mocha FID and the police help you. Call 311 or 1-888-662-2847. The time by the FID, Mocha and the JCF is...
Now, 6 minutes after 8 o'clock, we're inside of the Africa Forum. This is Running African. And I think we have my next very special guest, and he's going to help me in this segment to pay tribute to one of our colleagues who has passed. A very good friend, my dearest friend and colleague. We've worked together for so many years. Also a very good friend of the brother who's coming on now. He's coming on to talk about the MAGA moment in Black America and the MAGA moment. But we're going to take some time and take this time with Ras Jomo to talk about Joy Morgan. Joy Morgan, you know her very well. She has been a broadcast assistant and a producer on this program for many years. She came to IRFM in the early 1990s, I think around 96, possibly 95. She came from JBC, and I think at the minute that JBC was absorbed by the RJR group, that she came to, I think, first to ZIP and then to IRFM. She worked in IRFM in the traffic department, that is the traffic accounting department. A lot of people don't understand when we say traffic department because you think it has to do with motor vehicles, but it has to do with commercials, with radio ads, with everything that goes on the programming log. And she was one of those persons who helped to define and redefine over time what IRFM's programming log looked like in terms of IRFM as a young station. So she came in pretty early when all of this was being computerized as opposed to digitized, right? Computerized. She came in pretty early and worked 24/7 with skeletal team. She used to sleep here in the traffic department on the floor. They have beds, they have sheets, they have covers. Just a skeletal group. And she, in terms of what the log became, what the programming log became, because when we started, we were literally doing things analog, literally by hand. And then when Joy Morgan came, with the knowledge she came with from JBC, she was able to kind of guide the process, and then later on further guided the process when we were now internationalizing the traffic department, that is to say, tapping into the best practices from Europe and the United States and North America and so on. She was also the one who guided that process. And so she was in the traffic department for many moons, just guiding that process and bringing the programming log to what we have now. A lot of people who even work here now probably don't even know the extent to which what we have now was set by Joy Morgan in the early days. Later on, and I'm not quite sure if Ras Jomo is in the room with me yet, but later on, when I think it was 96, late 96, she came to the programming department, might have been 96, 97, and that was my department. I was heading up that department. And so she became a senior producer in the department. She started out as a broadcast, just learning the programming because she already knew the traffic. And so as she was coming from traffic, as a matter of fact, as a manager of the traffic department. Understand this. So when she came to the programming department, it wasn't a demotion, but she had to learn programming. And she is the kind of person who is really very, very humble. And so she was willing to learn and to be guided. So she started as a broadcast assistant, and then later on as a producer, and then as a senior producer. We worked on so much. We worked on almost everything. So the In Search of series that we talk about, she was head cook and bottle washer in that. We went into every parish in Jamaica, along with Professor Vereen Shepherd, because we partnered with Professor Shepherd, and we also partnered with the University of the West Indies through Professor Shepherd, the Jamaica National Heritage Trust through Professor Shepherd. And we went across the nation. We also did a lot of overseas travel together. Howard University, Washington, D.C., New York, Florida. And I'm talking about on the job, doing our programs live. One of the first programs that I did driving, we were broadcasting from the Smithsonian, and we're going to leave the Smithsonian. This program from the Smithsonian to the 12 Tribes of Israel headquarters in D.C. in D.C. And Nicholas Evans was there, Joy, myself, and the conversation we had was, could we? Because we don't want to break the program, and that was before anti-intelligence and before we were digitized. But the question we raised to ourselves and answered is, could we broadcast an hour and a half from the Smithsonian and then drive from the Smithsonian, kept the broadcast going, and to 12 Tribes of Israel, and continue the broadcast as if nothing happened? And it happened. It happened because of the hard work of a team. And Joy was adamant that could happen. Nicholas will remember that we did that. And that's just one. I remember we were broadcasting from Howard University. We had gone there. It was Howard University homecoming, and we're going to do that broadcast. But, so we're T4. And we went to a club in D.C. where the Howard University students were having like a jam under some building, like a really dark club, and Beanie Man was there, so we had to go see Beanie Man. And I remember interviewing, we wanted to interview Beanie Man. It was so loud, and Joy said to me, "Now, we can't do it. We can't interview Beanie Man." And Beanie Man said he wanted to be interviewed too. And we're live inside of GT Taylor's show. It was that time of night when GT was on, and Joy arranged it somehow that after we'd go shop the day before to find out what we were going to wear to this party. And so we're spiffy, I'm telling you, literally. And I remember being and grab my hand, and he said, "Yes, we can do this." And Joy said, "Yeah, man, we could find a quiet place." And between Joy and Beanie Man, we found a bathroom. And I remember saying to GT, said, "GT, the place is so noisy. We are now broadcasting live from the bathroom of this nightclub." I remember it's a bathroom. It wasn't a bathroom, it was a toilet. And Beanie Man was really great. But this was facilitated by Joy. This is the kind of producer that Joy was, is that the show must go on. There was nowhere in the world that the program went. And it was more than one program, because she was also the senior producer on the Tuesday night program that I did, Sex-Wise. As a result of this, we had the best psychiatrists, the best doctors, the best gynecologists, anybody we wanted, Joy was able to find. I remember in the early days when we were doing our training with her, I said to her, "Joy, I know people talk about 3 degrees of separation, but for me as a journalist, I think there's only one." And I talked her through it to say, all right, let us say you want to find, and I'd give her the name of a president of a country that is nowhere near us. I won't give, not an American president, but say Putin. Who is between you and getting a Vladimir Putin onto my program or onto our program? And she was saying, no, that's not possible. But that's in the early days. And I talked her through that to say, who do we know who would have Putin's number? That one call that we can make. It always works, believe me. 1 degree of separation is what I believe in. And then Joy came to believe that, and Kishima. So it was a team. It was a really, really, really tight team in the programming department. Joy Morgan, Kishima Francis, Samantha. I'm talking about the early days. In the Who Am I Leaving Out, from the very early days of the programming department. The programming department grew over time, and all of the junior staff that came in, they literally learned from. I oversaw it, but the majority of them learned immediate learning from Joy and Kishima. This is basically what it was. And that's a work. But Joy, we became friends over time. We knew each other's mother, and we traveled together. We've been traveling together forever. And so as the children came, they became Auntie Joy or Auntie Kabu. And the family became one family. The anniversaries were celebrated together. The birthdays were celebrated together. The church services, the funerals, you name it. We became family. And for me, this is a time of disbelief. I am totally shocked. And I'm shocked and broken, if you will. Joy was so full of life. I still find that I want to take up the phone to call Joy, to tell her or to say to her, did you hear what happened? And what I'm about to tell her happened is an interesting thing because it is her own passing. And so when that hit me last week, I wrote a poem, and kind of looking for the poem, but I wrote a poem that just came to me in the moment, in the time, about how we never practiced goodbye. We talk a lot over the years as we face death in the family, death of friends, and so on. And so I wrote this poem for Joy that I'm going to read now. It's called We Never Practiced Goodbye. Let me get that together. To Joy,
Kabu, I am here with you. Yep.
To Paula, to Marva, and to the entire family. My deepest condolences. So this poem I wrote for Joy. We never practice goodbye, not once, not in the hours when the world was silenced and conversation turned from laughter to memory. We never asked what the other should do if one of us simply stopped being here. We never spoke about who to call first, whose voice should carry the news, how the words should be arranged so that they would not break in the mouth. We never planned how to survive the moment when a name becomes past tense. But we spoke of death many times. We stood together in small churches and crowded yards, listening to songs rise slowly. Shoulder with the grieving. We sat afterward on verandas and in the kitchen, speaking softly about the one that had gone. Do you remember how we would say they looked really good, how they looked peaceful, how they looked like they were sleeping? How strange it felt to see someone so still after knowing so much about them. How the absence in the room came before anyone spoke about it. And later, we would talk about them again. How much we missed them, how their names kept appearing in our sentences, as if they were simply late and not gone. We practiced mourning for so many others, but never, never, never for you. No. Now there are moments when I reach for the phone without thinking. A small piece of news, a passing thought, something only you would understand. And the first instinct is still to call you and say, did you hear the news? Then the strange truth settles in my heart. The news is about you. You were supposed to be there after the funeral, sitting beside us with that patient understanding that always made grieving feel less hard to bear. You were supposed to say what you always said. We will miss them, yes, but we then had a good life. Now the silence has your name in it, and we're left holding a conversation that cannot be finished, and still we're speaking about you. In memory, in the spaces between the days, in the quiet moments when the world slows enough for love to be heard again. We never practice goodbye, Joy, but if love has any power beyond death and bone, then know this. You are still spoken of the way we used to speak of those we lost, with tenderness, with disbelief, and with gratitude, and with that same old sentence we said so many times before, how much we miss you. And I see my brother has come into the room. He is here to talk about something completely different, but here he is. And it's turned out this way. Ras Joma, my brother.
Yes. Rastafari greetings. And I have to, I'm listening to your timeline, and I was trying to communicate with my children, when we all began to first talk, and Joy was that main connector. And as I thought about it, it's probably around 20 years. So I guess subtract 20 from where we are now, and that is where our relationship started. And that is actually the main link that got us as close as we are. And it also was a time when IRFM was moving to being on the internet and not just listening to cassettes a few weeks, later after the programs had aired.
Yes.
We have a long history of paying attention to IRFM. So that evolution of communication with Joy also turned into us working on international things. Do you remember the independence of South Sudan and talking with generals and things of that nature that we all work together? Because we share information, for those who don't know in the outside world, we do a lot of sharing with each other. And I feel a little heavy still. I was in Jamaica for a family funeral, and when I came home, I had not checked all of my WhatsApp connections, and I saw it online, and then I looked on my phone and I had not missed calls, but connections from the family. So, you know how it feels bad, like, wow, I wish I could have made one more stop.
Wow. Wow. I remember, we've done so much together, Jomo. I mean, Joy's a producer, so she's always, and you're such an integral part of the Africa Forum. And so she's always in contact with you. And I think in a similar way, you teased her as much as Muta teased her. But with but with a different kind of teasing.
Not as hard. Not more loving.
Not as hard. And because she was also a producer, by the way, on The Cutting Edge with Musa
Yes.
Baruka and The Stepping Razor. And she was producing. Over time here at IRFM, she produced every program on air over time. Nicholas Evans is reminding me that she came to the programming department in 2002. And that is true. And we're talking about all the way to possibly, Nick, 2015. Correct me if I'm wrong. But so she's an integral part of the very foundation of IRFM. You also dealt with obviously becoming great friends, but as a producer. Tell us about that whole relationship with Joy, who is the one who would normally call you and say, "You have to be on the show." Behave yourself.
Well, it was an instruction, and usually whether we were away or whether I was there live, just the communications. Even I guess setting up our relationships with live broadcasts from Rebel Salute and all the different things that we do. Like I said, whether scheduled or non-scheduled, and even work with other artists. But the kindness, the joy, the literal joy, and then also outside of the professionalism, someone who's actually current in history, culture, news, so that it made everything more pleasant because all of our hearts and minds were in the same place, and they remained in the same place even after her not being at Irie. So, the story doesn't stop. The relationship, the energies keep going, right?
It does.
And
it does.
Yeah. So
I want to thank you so much. You came to talk about something else, but the ancestors would have it that we are talking about joy. And I want to invite you again next week to come back to talk about Black America and the MAGA moment, only because we have 3 minutes left before we go to the Supreme Ventures draw. So I hope that you're okay with what the ancestors led us to do this morning.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it stays and it remains contextualized as all things with everything that you've been talking about on the show, from tourism to Jamaica to Dr. Shepard. Something is happening where Black people don't hold on to our own memory and what happened to us in particular, and we can lose bearings. We don't need to get so comfortable that we lose reference of who we are, because in critical times it might be hard to amass our best energies if we don't remember our history. And I think that that's one of the main attractions to your international institution, and the necessity for that continuum, in all forms: arts, culture, travel, tourism. We have to be mindful of who we are at every stage and who we are all over this planet.
You're so right about that.
We got a lot of challenges. Yeah.
Yes, you're so right about that. Listen, my brother, thank you so much. You're well known to the IRFM listenership, and also to our Africa Forum family. So no great introduction, but you are a radio broadcast. You're a DJ. You're a presenter in Buffalo. I said Baltimore on my social media.
Because that's where we meet in Baltimore. Sometimes we meet in Baltimore when you're out running around the country. Yeah.
Nina Simone kind of situation. Last time we met, where were we? It was DC?
Baltimore. DC and Baltimore. We did the show live.
Yes. Yeah. So, we always woke up in Baltimore. I think that's where you are. And, and we spent so much time there with Joy over the years, and we're always in DC. We went to we've been to the Howard University homecoming quite a few times. And we never missed the party. Even if I don't want to go, we have to go shopping, go buy clothes, we go party. That was Joy. And we usually party until morning. It is what it is. Here we are. Jomo, thank you so much, my brother, for helping us.
Keep the joy. Keep the joy. Hold the joy.
We'll keep the joy. We'll keep the joy. All right. Just standing by now for the Supreme Ventures draw. That's coming up at 8:30. We are going to be talking to Professor Horace Campbell in the next segment of the program, because we're looking at what's happening around us. And one of the things we want to spend some time looking at is the empire of the United States, talk about the dollar and de-dollarization, if you will. Professor Horace Campbell will help us to understand what's happening. Let me go to... All right, my very special guest is online, Professor Horace Campbell. Professor Campbell was with us last week. He is back with us this week. He is a peace and social justice activist. He's also a professor of African American Studies and Political Science at Syracuse University and a chairperson of the Global Pan-African Movement, North American Chapter. He's the author of Global NATO and the Catastrophic Failure in Libya, Monthly Review Press 2013. Please get that book, Global NATO and the Catastrophic Failure in Libya. If you haven't yet, we've been reading it in the Running African Book Club. Professor Horace Campbell is joining us again. Thank you so much, Prof, for coming back once again inside of the Africa Forum, AQUAB.
Thank you, Kabu. Greetings to everybody, everywhere. I think from your announcement, it is clear that the reach of IRFM is now global, so we can greet people in all parts of the world, but I continue to greet our brothers and sisters right there in Jamaica, yes, as we wake up this morning to another week of warfare and destruction against the people of West Asia.
And I want you to put this in context for us, Prof, because we have been talking about this. We've been listening to the different legacy media, mainstream media. If you listen to mainstream media, you're more Dunstan when you turn on the TV or the radio. We try to search out the information as much as we can on YouTube and the digital platforms. That is not so much of a struggle, but it's there. But I want you to put this war in context for us. The current confrontation that we're seeing, the attack on Iran, the U.S. has not been able to tell us why it's gone there. Israel, we can just guess as to why they're there. But one of the things that you have said, that this is a desperate, and you said this last week, reaction of an empire trying to slow its own decline. Let's start there.
Very, very, very much so. Not only an empire trying to slow its decline, but an empire that is in a society where there is total disregard for human life, for the well-being of the environment, and for basic laws of dignity of human beings. The fact is that the present hostilities being waged against the people of Iran, and which is affecting the people of all the societies in West Asia, is actually unprecedented in its scope, because the present leadership of the United States of America has said that they're waging war without apology, without hesitation or mercy. Now, I want to repeat the words of the Secretary of Defense. He calls himself the Secretary of War of the United States of America. Without apology, without hesitation, or without mercy. No, that is the language of war crimes. It is the language of war crimes in a condition where there is a war that has no basis in international law. It is not a war for self-defense. And as you stated, the government, leaders, the military authorities in the United States have not given a justification for this war against the people of Iran. The nature of this war is one that is killing citizens indiscriminately. And the first day of the war, we saw more than 150 school children being killed in Iran. And we've seen that in Lebanon, 1 million persons have been displaced, with thousands being killed. Why is the United States and Israel carrying out a war that does not have the sanction of international law, and a war which, under the laws of the United Nations, the United States could be held accountable? The reason the United States is abrogating international law is because of the recklessness of the current leadership of the United States of America. The recklessness stems from the fact that the present leadership that has called out thousands and thousands of troops called ICE, Immigration, Customs and Enforcement, against the people of the United States of America, a government that is oppressing its own people by surveillance and arrest, but this government that is at the same time declaring that it can occupy and take over countries. It can take over the Panama Canal. It can take over Greenland. It can take over Canada. A government that sent its military forces into Venezuela to kidnap the leader of Venezuela and his wife. Why are they doing this? And as we've written into Pambazuka, the United States of America operated with the dollar as a currency of world trade for the past 80 years, since 1944, since the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944, when the world agreed that the United States currency, the dollar, would be the currency of world trade, and the United States would back up the dollar by having 1 ounce of gold for $35. At that time, the price of the United States dollar was tied to gold. Now, because the United States have been fighting wars against people who want their independence and liberation, especially in the war against the people of Vietnam, the United States was not able to keep its commitment of $35 to per ounce of gold. Because since 1971, we've had what is called a floating international exchange rate. Now, that floating exchange rate could survive during the Cold War. That was called the Cold War because the United States would say to Germany and to Japan, as they said in the Plaza Accord, that we are defending you from communism. But since 1991, at the end of this so-called Cold War, the Europeans set out to establish the euro. The countries of the third world, especially the countries in ASEAN countries, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, after the 1997 crisis, sought to protect themselves from the IMF strictures. And since 2000, China has recovered as a major source of the international economy. In this context, the United States has depended on its military to secure its position in the world, what we have written and called the military management of the international system. So that the dollar as the currency of world trade now depends on the United States military.
Finish your sentence, your thought. I'm going to take a break.
Let me just finish this point.
Yes.
To the point now where, as we speak, the dollar is $5,000 to the ounce of gold in a situation where the United States debt is $38 trillion. This means that many countries in the world are trying to get out of the control of the United States, who use the indexing of the price of oil in dollars to be able to ensure that the United States dollar remains the currency of world trade. Russia, Iran, Venezuela were 3 countries that joined up with China to set up what is called the petro-yuan, which is a new international trading system. Now, Russia, they put sanctions against. Venezuela, they went and seized Venezuelan oil, and they're moving to destroy Iran. The United States, in its inability to compete in the new multipolar world, is using its military to destroy countries, as they're trying to do with Iran, to seize resources, as they've done in Venezuela, and seize resources as they've done in Libya. So the future of the world is based on the United States using its military power to seize resources to remain the dominant economic power in the world.
All right, we're back with you. We're inside of the Africa Forum. This is Running African, and Professor Horace Campbell is on the line with us. We're talking about the American Empire in decline and the war on Iran. Prof, you have said that for nearly 80 years, the US dollar has been the backbone of the global financial system. But that I hear you saying that we could be witnessing right now the end of the dollar-dominated world economy. How so? What are the indicators pointing to this? And what are we seeing that is already telling us that this is exactly where we are?
Well, I would not use the strong word as the end, because the present moment, there is no competitor for the dollar as a currency of international trade. I would say the decline. That is, there are countries seeking alternatives to the dollar because the United States has used the dollar as a weapon, what they call the weaponization of the dollar. And the main instrument for this weaponization is the United States Treasury and OFAC. And that is what they've used against Iran since 1979 with sanctions. They've used against Libya, against North Korea, against China, against Russia. Now, the use of sanctions and weaponization of the dollar, as we discussed last week, sanctions against the people of Cuba, are not used for economic reasons. They're used for political reasons. In the case of Cuba, as we discussed last week, the Cuban society wanted to develop a place where the needs of citizens for health, food, and social well-being came before profits. And the United States considered this a threat. When Libya considered using its resources to back up the African currency to get out of the dollar-dominated international financial system, the United States bombed and destroyed Libya. And so what we're seeing in the entire international system is that societies such as China, Brazil, Russia, India have sought to develop an alternative which was called BRICS, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, to develop a trading system. And BRICS now has close to 12 countries that are members of BRICS. So there's an alternative trading economic system that is developing. But the dollar has declined from, say, 30 years ago. 70% of the trade in international goods being traded through the dollar to today, where it is 57%. And in that condition of the decline, the United States sees the writing on the wall and is using military power to make up for economic power. And it is not any radical who is saying the situation has changed. It is the Prime Minister of Canada, the closest ally of the United States of America, who said that there's a rupture in the international trading and economic situation. And in that rupture, the United States is intensifying the rupture by going to war. And this war against the people of Iran is going to be as decisive in the international political economy as the Second World War was in reshaping global alliances, global trading system, and global economic relations. And the place that we must pay attention to in this program is how to strengthen Africa in this new global alliance. Because everyone is talking about China or about Europe or about Latin America or about Russia. And in this new global reconfiguration, they're all thinking that Africa is going to be a puppet of one of these powers.
Well, let us talk about
our
Africa.
Constituency. The most important outcome of this war is for the peace and to end the war against the people of Iran and for the people of Africa to build economic cooperation and monetary cooperation not to be exploited by Europe or China or the United States or Russia.
All right, I want to come back and talk about Africa, Prof. I have to take another quick break, but also to look at, there's an interesting thing I saw, and thanks to my brother Akeem, who sent me this information this morning, that's coming out of Sudan, where the UAE has been taught, and I think this has been proven, to be actively involved in the wars in Sudan. But since the war on Iran and the UAE now finds itself on the back foot with the destruction of the American bases there, that the situation in Sudan is seeing a change, a positive change, and this is interesting. But I also want to look at East Africa, as you have pointed us to, and continental Africa, to see what are the opportunities from here and how we work together. Let me take a quick break and come back. Go to Africa, Prof, and if you could include in that how some of these Arab states, Gulf corporations, if you will, have been involved in Africa, and what the impact of this war will be on that status quo.
Well, thank you. I'm curious about your producer, the one who gave you the information about what has improved in the Sudan.
No, it's a listener. It's a listener who has sent me information which I have verified. The reporting coming out of the Sudan, and you know, the UAE's involvement in the Sudan is something that we have been talking about over time. But he sent me this information this morning, which I have verified, that the RSF is a little bit on the back foot because the UAE is so distracted from, this is coming out of the Sudan, that it's so distracted by its own problems with you know, the US bases there being destroyed. And so the UAE is heavily involved in Africa. This is what we know. So the question then is, what's the impact on continental Africa and places where we have the Gulf corporations involved in?
Thank you. It is very important for your listeners to know the role of the Gulf Cooperation Council, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Oman in destroying Africa, plundering African resources, and militarizing Africa, and supporting anti-people elements in Africa. In the case of Libya, as you know, those were the countries, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar, that sent military forces to destroy Libya, and they keep the faction that is in Benghazi afloat militarily. In the case of the UAE, it is a particularly despicable regime.
Yes.
Because it is a regime that is financing and supporting genocidal actions in the Sudan. So when someone says that the situation has improved, the situation in the Sudan is appalling in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of persons at the hands of the RSF, a group that is backed by the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, a country that is plundering the gold from Sudan, because the UAE is hedging its bet because of the crisis of the US dollar. All of these countries want to get gold out of Africa, and the UAE in particular has been active all across Africa in logistics, in military relations, control of ports, and in plundering resources. And so the UAE is particularly odious because it's a country where the people do not have democratic rights. 90% of the people who work in UAE are not from the UAE. The country is comprised of only 10% of the population has citizens. It is an odious country that established itself as a center for trade, where everybody talks about going to Dubai. But the UAE should be brought before the International Criminal Court for the crimes it is committing in Africa. And it is an ally of the United States of America in this war against the people of Palestine and the people of Iran, the people of Africa. So the Gulf Cooperation Council, this is an alliance of very, very rich anti-democratic governments like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, and so forth, who are in alliance with the most despicable political elements. In fact, one of the elements that operates from the UAE is a man called Eric Prince, that has a company that is well known as a mercenary force. They call them private military contractors. Those are the kinds of people who are attracted to the UAE at this time.
And we see them turning up in the Epstein files, and I know I'm going left with that, but we see them turning up in the Epstein files in very, very serious ways. As a matter of fact, Ben Suleiman, who had to step down recently, was seen, I mean, I've seen this myself, writing to Jeffrey Epstein saying, "I love the torture video you sent me." He had to step down. He is in partnership with Jamaica. Jamaica has embarked on port developing ports and UAE tourism, and they have announced this. But the person who they've been working with on this, because we see the pictures and we've been reading the articles, is Ben Suleiman. I'm bringing that in because you see, it's very important to understand how this whole area and what we're talking about when we talk about a global catastrophe, to use your word, Prof, how this connects back to Jamaica, that we are not immune from what is unfolding.
Kabu, I would like you to repeat for me and for your listeners what you said about the UAE in Jamaica. I would like you to repeat that, because when you repeat it, I'm going to repeat what it means for Tanzania, what it means for Somalia, what it means for... Please repeat.
So Jamaica has embarked on this partnership with the UAE, and being announced from last year into this year, and I think they've kind of ramped it up early this year, which is to say tourism. They're now looking to the UAE for tourism, so they've entered into some kind of tourism partnership with the UAE. They're also expanding the ports, PORTS, so they're going into that industry, and they're also using the UAE for that. The extent to which the UAE is sponsoring this, I think, is for us to find out, but I know it's a partnership. And we know that the person who has been fronting this is Ben Suleiman. Ben Suleiman was forced to step down. He is he's a second in line, and the brother to Ben Suleiman from Formula One, F1 football. He had to, racing. He had to step down just 3 or 4 weeks ago because he has turned up in the Epstein files many, many times, and is the one who actually wrote to Epstein to say, "I love the torture video you sent me." And, as a radio station, we are bound to say, allegedly, and we're bound to say the fact that you're in the Epstein files don't mean that you've done anything wrong, but this is the situation. This is a context.
Thank you. I wanted you to repeat, because everything you said is what the people of Tanzania are saying. The people of East Africa are saying. The people of Tanzania have seen where the elements of the DP world have come in to take over the ports and the logistics. That means they can smuggle in and out things out of the country. They have come into Tanzania to say they're involved in tourism. They've taken over the Serengeti and removing the Maasai. So here is a government that is an odious government that is representing itself to countries such as Jamaica and Tanzania and many other countries as an investor with billions of dollars. Now, I am asking the Jamaican economists, the Jamaican teachers, that they should be writing about this every day, and they should be calling on their parliamentary representative to break any agreement with the United Arab Emirates, because the United Arab Emirates is supporting crimes against humanity in all parts of the world. The people of Tanzania have a campaign to try to expose their governments in taking away the land of the Maasai, in giving large territory in the Serengeti. The Serengeti is supposed to be a national park, which is bigger than Jamaica, and they've given free rein to the UAE in this place. So this is the situation we face.
We must look then at the trade deals that they have signed, because we haven't looked to see what the land connection might be, and I think this is critical for us to do. This is a role for journalism. I implore.
You see, this is all done in the name of investment.
Yes.
And there is a point at which investment does not make sense. This is creating. It is going to criminal mafia force and say, bring the money that you're getting from ill-gotten gains into my country, and we'll turn a blind eye to this. And this is the kind of neoliberal world that we've been open to. So the other point I thought you were going to raise,
yes,
in the Caribbean was the role of Z, that is Blackwater, and Eric Prince in Haiti, and the role of Eric Prince and the UAE. So the Caribbean, Haiti, and Jamaica is not immune to what is happening globally. So let us use whatever resource we have. When the 1975 oil crisis was afoot, the intellectuals in Jamaica, Norman Gervin, and people like Persistent Poverty, George Beckford, Al Francis, they were in the forefront of pushing for a new international economic order and creating a new platform within the United Nations and within international trading organizations like UNCTAD to bring new rules to the international economy. We are at a similar time where we need intellectuals, activists, and social groups in the Caribbean come to the forefront against this war against the people of Iran and against the people of Palestine. And again, this is also a war against the people of Jamaica.
And I want to, you had mentioned earlier that when this is over, or on the backside of this, because I don't know the extent of over, that we're going to see the same kind of shocks that we saw after World War II. And so the question then is, are we in, and I asked you this last week, are we in World War III? Are we at the start of World War III, or this is a precursor to World War III? And what are the implications, a question we didn't get to, for continental Africa with what's happening right now?
Well, this war, we're in its third week, and the President of the United States has declared that they've destroyed Iran. But in this third week of the war, the Iranians are still fighting and to defend their society. So whatever information they're presenting on Iran is not correct. And when you introduced this program, you talked about the role of the mainstream media. Probably 1 or 2% what you're hearing on the mainstream media. I'm glad what you're hearing on the mainstream media is correct. I'm glad you have this map up, because
Let's put
if
the map up.
the listeners look at this map, you'll see the Straits of Hormuz, which is what is called the Persian Gulf. And in the Straits of Hormuz, there's that little choke point where 20% of the oil in the international trading system moves. That has been closed. All of the countries in this Gulf are now affected by the war. Israel, Lebanon, Palestine, Saudi Arabia, Oman, the UAE, Kuwait, Jordan, and Palestine. Now, that war will have a definite effect on the countries of East Africa, Egypt, Sudan, Ethiopia, Somalia. It is already affecting those countries, because in the case of Somalia, DP World has attempted and is in the process with Israel to break up Somalia and to put a port for Israel and the UAE in Somalia. And that is going against the African Union and the integrity of the Somali people. So across Africa, Egypt, which has been affected negatively, Ethiopia, which is affected, all across North Africa, the people of Africa has been affected, and this war is going to affect the people negatively. Now, the question you asked me is, will this war be like World War II? Well, it is difficult to say. It will depend on the extent to which the United States prolong the attempted destruction of the people of Iran. Now, your listeners should know that when the United States overthrew, but by the way, Iran is a country of 95 or 94 million persons. Iran is a multi-ethnic, multinational society. When the Iranian Revolution took place in 1978 to 1979, the United States inspired a war against the people of Iran using Saddam Hussein in Iraq. That war lasted for 8 years. They thought Iran would be destroyed within weeks. Iran is a country of a long history. This is the Kingdom of Persia. The name of Persia was changed to Iran in 1935. They fought that war for 8 years. If this war goes on for any longer than 6 months or 1 year, the repercussions of this war will bring in more countries than the countries I've listed. And then we are seeing a greater conflagration in the world. It is dependent on the extent to which the people of the United States can curb its political and military leadership from plunging the world into a catastrophe.
I saw a poll last night. As a matter of fact, I saw, it's about 2 o'clock this morning, that I saw President Trump on Truth Social tweeting that a poll that from Newsmax, so we know what we're talking about, right? Serious right-wing stations. And the poll was showing that a majority of the American people, and no, this is Newsmax, remember this, so this is not scientific and it is totally wrong. But the president retweeted this. This is to show you what his thinking is, that the majority of the American people are in favor of the war, especially when they are told about what the dangers of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz is. And then he goes on to say, the MAGA is like 90-odd% in agreement, and then for the rest of America, we're looking at something in the 60s or the 70%. That I think should tell us what his thinking is in terms of where to go from here. He has also said he has also tweeted on Truth Social to the Europeans, come and go and defend the Strait of Hormuz. If you do this, then I will do my best to protect you while you are there. What does this mean in essence, and is this contradictory? Let me take, and Professor Harris Campbell is live with us. We are broadcasting live on Zoom, on YouTube, on Facebook, and on all IRFM platforms. Once you find us in one place, you'll be able to find us everywhere. So get going. We're kind of getting into the last segment. So tell your friends, and you'll be able to watch this later on, though, because we'll put it out on. It will remain on YouTube if they don't take it down. We're so radical around here. And I'll share it also on my Facebook page. So, and other platforms, IG and so on. So thank you for staying with us, Prof. As we went into the break, one of the things that you said is the ability to whether or not we can tell if the United States is on the backside of this, that we are close to what World War II, the conditions of World War II, or whether or not we're even in World War III, will be dependent on what happens, what America does. And so that's the reason I pointed out to you what the president was saying. But we do also know that there must be a cabal, if you will, the Rothschild and the Rockefellers and the J.P. Morgans, and I dare say even the Carneys in the background, the neocons, if you will, in the background, because at the end of the day, as you pointed out earlier, this goes back to banking. Follow the money. The financial order is from the Medicis to the Patsis to the Rockefellers to the Rothschilds. It's the same war. This is how I'm reading this. So does it tell you anything?
Well, I think the people you're talking about, the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, that is old news. We have a new group of people who are in artificial intelligence, who are in digital currencies, and into new cryptocurrencies, and they're elevating United States military power beyond the United States government. These are the people who control Twitter, who control Facebook.
The Peter Thiels and Palantir.
And they support the state of Israel.
Yes.
So the people of Jamaica have a vested interest in ensuring that this World War III does not come about. In 1945, when World War II was ending, the Jamaican people fought in 1938 so that the Jamaican people would come out of colonialism. In 1945, when the United Nations was created, Jamaica was not an independent state. But yet, the Jamaican people found ways to register their support for international law and for ending all forms of warfare. Jamaica is a small society. In the context of the Caribbean, it is calling for what the people of Iran are calling for: reparations and reparative justice. The Iranian people have brought attention to the world of the crimes of apartheid. The Jamaican people, through its spokesperson, cultural artists, have said, like Peter Touch says, we must fight against apartheid. So the Jamaican people cannot stand by while apartheid and genocide is carried out in Palestine, while what is going on in Sudan or in Iran. Now, where does IRI FM come in? IRI FM is part of the collective voice of those in the world who want peace and an end to this war. You have a role to play in the United States of America, among your communities of the Caribbean people in the United States of America, in Europe, in other parts of the world, to support peace. Yes. The media in North America is presenting information that you read from that poll about the support for this war. From where I sit, I do not see that support, not even from members of the ruling party of the United States for this war. But we must magnify the voices of those in the United States and elsewhere that is calling for an end to this war against the people of Iran, end to the Israeli genocide against Palestine. And those forces the Jamaican people should align with. I again come back to the role of the church and religious institutions in the Caribbean. that are being called on to support Israel and the United States because they're carrying out the hand of God. We must carry out active intellectual, political, and ideological work at every section of our society to explain to them that the abrogation of international law, which is being carried out by killing the people of Iran, is a danger for the people of all parts of the world. We should big up those organizations and citizens in the United States that are calling for an end for the war, and also those leaders in other parts of the world, in Africa. And I urge your listeners to read Pambazuka News when we have written about how this war is affecting Africa. But inside of Europe, the European leaders as a bloc is no longer a force in world politics. But I want to mention two leaders in Europe that we should identify as standing up to the United States of America. The leadership of Ireland, who have said they will not support what the United States is doing in Iran. The leadership of Spain, that is saying you cannot use our territory as a launching pad to destroy the people of Iran. And this is the kind of alliance that IRI FM should be linked to. You should be establish linkages with radio stations in Spain, with radio stations in Ireland, radio stations in Nigeria, radio stations in Kenya, so that IRI FM becomes a global diplomat for peace. That stations like these, you do not depend on people to go only to YouTube or the other platforms. That we should enter into a partnership with global Pan-Africanists, with Pambazuka News, with those forces in the peace movement, in the global Pan-African movement. We're having a discussion on Wednesday about the war in Iran. Why? Because the trade union movement in the United States of America is being told that Iran is an oppressive government, oppressing its women and killing its people, and the workers of the United States in the trade union, the AFL-CIO, must support the United States government. So at every level of society, we must be engaged in this intellectual, ideological war for peace and for social justice.
You're so right about that, Prof. I think that more than any time, this is a kind of networking and partnership that media needs. We do have a responsibility to our listeners and to the nation, to the Caribbean, to ensure that we are bringing truth to them. It is very, very difficult as it is now. We're told we're, disinformation, misinformation, we're in a post-truth age, all of that rampant, and our people are now exposed only to the CNNs and the network channels from out of the United States. This, of course, is one of the reasons why, as you mentioned, the church, we go there again, that so many of our people who are, and our elders especially, who are so glued to CNN to get information from here, are taking sides, interestingly, with people like I heard Vijay Prashad talk about some of these people being dangerous, the most dangerous people in power right now, people like Marco Rubio, people like Pete Hegseth, and so on, because they're carrying this faith-based line which goes back to the Bible. How important is it, Prof, for our people to understand that this has nothing to do with anything to do with Christianity, and that this is the work of the most the wickedest of the lot of them? How important is it to get this through to our people, and how do we even begin to do that? It's pretty hard work, I can tell you.
It should not be so hard in Jamaica.
Oh, it's very hard.
It shouldn't be so hard in Jamaica, because from the beginning, after the genocide of the Taino people in Jamaica, they came to tell the Africans in Jamaica that it was the Christian church that wanted them to be enslaved. And every leader in Jamaica that was against slavery was a religious leader, like Sam Sharp or Paul Bogle So we have a tradition in Jamaica, in the United States, in all parts of in Africans were enslaved, where religious leader opposed slavery. Sam Shaw in Montego Bay, in fighting against slavery, used the Bible and used concepts of freedom from the Bible. We must stand up against those so-called evangelicals in the United States who are using the Bible to support racism. We have a tradition, as we said last week, that in the United States of America, there are traditional religious leaders, such as Martin Luther King, who fought for peace, for the rights of workers. The last campaign that Martin Luther King was on was for the rights of the garbage workers in Memphis, Tennessee. We have a tradition like that in the Caribbean, where there are religious leaders who stood on the side of working peoples. And when we have religious leaders who want to make money and are linked up to despicable forces in Israel and the United States of America, we must use every platform to expose them and oppose them.
Prof, I'm going to make this our final question, only because we intended to have you on for a much longer time, but we have to make a link with Muta Baruka, and I know he's taking the time from you. So Muta, please ask for the time. He called in just now, wanted to talk about one of our colleagues who have passed, and so we're going to do that in the last 15 minutes. But when historians look back at this period, will this be the moment when we moved from the old order that Mark Carney referenced at Davos into the new order, which is you talked about the technocrats, who the Peter Thiels and the Palantirs and so on. Will this be the moment that we remember and recognize as a pivot, the move away from the old order into the new techno-feudalism and transhumanism and that kind of the trajectory that we seem to be on?
We are in that order already. But I go back to the fight against slavery. The order of slavery was to turn black enslaved people into robots, cut sugarcane to make money, to pack bananas to make money. If we put making money before human beings at this time in human history, then we're doing what we've seen in Jamaica, in Melissa, in the destruction of the planet Earth. Question is whether human beings have the agency to be able to organize to create a new society. Clearly, the political leaders in Jamaica of both political parties are doing a disservice to the Jamaican people in clarifying to them what is the meaning of global warming, in clarifying to them, to the people of Jamaica, what is the meaning of the United States blockade against Cuba. The Jamaican people do not need a government to explain how people got their eyesight restored in Jamaica by Cuban doctors. The Jamaican people do not need the government to tell them that the United States supported the apartheid government. The Jamaican people do not need the government to explain to them that Israel is carried out genocide in Palestine. And this is the time to go back to draw from the innermost strength of the Jamaican and Caribbean people that brought us the social movements for justice. We could not have created a Garvey movement internationally without coming from the wellspring of the opposition to that robotization. So let us go back to that inner spiritual strength of our people that cannot be destroyed and build that up with our knowledge of how to save the planet Earth and to turn back the violence of fascism and proto-fascism that is coming from the leadership of the United States of America.
Thank you so much, Prof. I really appreciate your time, and your ability. You're really good at helping us to understand how to view these changing times. Your book, Global Nature, is phenomenal. I think we should all be reading this. I think in a way it was predictive to Global Nature, because you literally saw this coming, didn't you, Professor Campbell?
Oh, most definitely. As in Global Nature, we ended the book by saying that in 1935, Italy invaded Abyssinia. And when Italy invaded Abyssinia, which is now called Ethiopia, the world turned their backs against black people when they said that this is bringing fascism. And we had World War II. Italy not only invaded Abyssinia, the Japanese invaded Manchuria, the Spanish Civil War started, and the Germans started the Second World War. After the invasion of Libya in 2011, we said that unless we curb France, Britain, and the United States, this is bringing us war in West Asia. And we've seen it now.
Yes.
The war that expanded from Libya, across Chad, West Africa, Sudan, Egypt, and across to Palestine. It is the time for international law to hold the United States and Israel accountable for the genocidal war against the people of Iran and the people of Palestine. As we speak, we have many people of Lebanese descent in Jamaica.
Yes.
And 1 million persons have been removed from their homes in Lebanon. More than 1,000 persons have been killed. Certainly, those in Jamaica who come from Lebanon must also raise their voices against this genocide war. And they cannot be supporting the state of Israel that is destroying Lebanon and has destroyed Palestine and continued this war against the Palestinian people. So, yes, we predicted that. But just as how Padmore and James and Garvey, especially Amy Jiggs Garvey, created organizations so that when the war ended, they rapidly moved towards political independence in Africa and in the Caribbean. So it is now we should set up the infrastructure for new Pan-African organizations for peace, reparative justice, cooperation across global Africa, so that Africans in Brazil, in Colombia, Venezuela, Cuba, the United States will be at one with the Africans in Africa that are fighting for peace. Because this destruction we see going on in Iran has been going on in the Congo since 1960. So we cannot separate this kind of warfare that is against the African people. The African people have a vested interest in overthrowing the capitalist system that is destroying the planet Earth and plundering the resources of the planet Earth.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you so much once again. I hope you come back because I want to have a further discussion with you with the League of Nations and the United Nations and the same rules-based order that Mark Carney talked about, the rupture, where the United Nations rests right now on the backside of this, and how it resembles the League of Nations and the Emperor, His Imperial Majesty, the Emperor Haile Selassie's speech to the League of Nations. Kind of remind me of what I saw the foreign minister from Iran did at the Security Council and what happened on the backside of that. So I want to put all of that in perspective if you'll come back and have a conversation with us about it.
Thank you for having me. And the social groups in Jamaica, Hail Up to Muta, and those people who are spoken word artists who have used the platform of the spoken word to educate the people. So I big up our Jamaican cultural leaders who have not only been cultural leaders in Jamaica, but cultural leaders globally. And these our cultural leaders must raise their voices in this time for peace and against the Zionist destruction in Palestine and in Iran.
Thank you so much, Professor Horace Campbell. Once again, Professor Campbell is a peace and social justice activist. He is also a professor of African American Studies and Political Science at Syracuse University and the chairperson of the Global Pan-African Movement, North America chapter. He is the author of Global Nature and the Catastrophic Failure in Libya. Please get your copy. I'm very pleased that I'm getting texts already from persons who have said that they are purchasing the books that we've spoken about. People have actually bought already so the gender violence in Jamaica and the Caribbean, and I have quite a few who have and are still sourcing the Global Nature. So thank you so much for that. A quick break. Thank you, Prof.